this challenge, we're looking at some streaming stats, and we've got some quirky rules to follow in order to make this challenge work. So let's have a look at our input data here. So we've got some information from some users when they've logged into this streaming, where they were, what type of content they were watching, and the duration of that session. Okay, so we've got a couple of bits to do to clean up this input data set. So first of all, if we look at the location, then you may be able to notice a couple of spelling errors in there. If you can't see the spelling errors, then a good trick is to use the geographical roles. So for example, changing the geographic role here, for example, to city. Then when you do that, you can see that we get a little exclamation mark next to where that doesn't match a city name. And then Prep's quite good at suggesting that, hey, Edinburgh is probably most likely what that city name should be, so you can change it to being Edinburgh. You can see that we also have some counties in here rather than city names, but Prep doesn't kind of highlight those as being incorrect, which is helpful. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of that change because I've already done that in the next step to correct that spelling error. We could also just replace that if we know how to spell it with a B, but I know Edinburgh is quite a difficult word to spell. I always like to double check as well. But yeah, that's why using that inbuilt functionality in Prep can be really useful. Next up, let's update this timestamp field here. We can see that it's very consistently written, but with slightly strange notation. So it's got a T between the date and the time. So if we just change the date type here to be a date time, then Prep automatically updates that quite nicely for us into being a date and a time. We just rename that field as well to be timestamp. Now, if we can kind of just look at our first few rows that we have in our data set, just to have a quick look there, then we can see that we've got some duplication going on here. So sort of the same session time start, but maybe in this particular data set, the user has pressed pause or something. So it's wherever it gets paused, it still counts as being in the same session, but it splits it up a bit. And so we're going to sum together those values. So aggregate, group by each of the other fields, and then sum the duration field for this data set. Okay, now it comes in that we're going to think a little bit about those primary and secondary content types and how we define those, because a lot of our content type at the moment is null. So first of all, for the primary stream, then we keep only certain locations. So that is London, Cardiff, and Edinburgh. So we filter to just have London, Cardiff, and Edinburgh, and then we rename the content type to be primary here. Similarly, here we just exclude those three cities. So London, Cardiff, and Edinburgh, and we rename all the null content types to be secondary. So we could definitely have done that with an if calculation, but I think that visually it helps a lot to split these up. Okay, and then we want to then work out the minimum active month. Okay, and in this case, so for primary content, we just do an LOD where we're taking the minimum timestamp per user, and then we're just changing that min active month to be the first of each of those months. Okay, but for the secondary content type and the preserved as well, what we do instead is that we group by our user ID and the content type, so that it works slightly differently when that min active month will start. So we do that, and then similarly we truncate this to be for the first of the month, and we just union these two streams back together. Okay, so again, I just prefer visually splitting these into different streams. I think it makes it a lot easier to follow what's happening than if we were doing everything in if calculations that would get a little bit more messy and complicated. And that's the kind of beauty of Prep, that you can split things up into simple steps that are a lot more visual than just doing things hidden away in calculations. So now we have the min active month for each of our content types, then we can bring in our average pricing. So if we just have a look at that there, we can see that we need to do something to clean up our month field there. So if we just go ahead and do that, change the data type to be a date, then we can join these in together. So we're joining on the content type, and the min active month equals the month. And we're doing a left join here because there is no preserved data type, content type here. We just have primary and secondary, and so we're just going with a left join there to make sure we don't lose these rows. Okay, so then we just remove any unnecessary fields that were duplicated from the join, and we work out our, we go to look at these average prices for those preserved content types, and we update that null value to be 14.98 instead, because there's a consistent value that we need to input there. And that's all we had to do for this challenge. So we just output that data set, and we've made it a lot cleaner, a lot more easy now to work with in Tableau Desktop without having to do some of that more messy cleaning in Tableau Desktop, making it much easier then to just drag and drop and create our visualizations. So hopefully that was clear, and thanks very much for watching.